Run.
Got it. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Gus Stadler, and along with Francesco Royster, I've joined the team of organizers for the Popular Music Books in Process series, a collaboration between the Journal of Popular Music Studies, IASPM US, and the Pop Conference. I'd like to start by thanking the longtime organizers of this wonderful series, Kim Mack, Eric Weisbard, Carl Wilson, and my fellow newbie, as well as my fellow newbie, Francesco Royster. Today's a special session that's deferred from last season, featuring critic, editor, and novelist Danyel Smith in conversation with Professor Daphne Brooks about Danielle's book, which is about to drop next week. We'll be back with another series of sessions. We think we'll be doing them bi-weekly starting probably sometime in May. We're currently accepting proposals for sessions, and I think Carl's going to post the link post a link that has more info and where you should send your proposal. Also note that you can see recordings of past sessions on Eric Weisbard's YouTube channel. So today we're very fortunate to have two leading lights in contemporary music writing with us, Danyel Smith and Daphne Brooks, who will be discussing Danielle's uh, about to appear, Shine Bright, A Very Personal History of Black Women in Pop. The publication is really imminent. I think it's coming out on Tuesday. Oprah Daily, Refinery 29, Essence, Ms., Electric Loot, Business Insider, and other venues have already marked it as one of the most anticipated books of the year. A weave of biography, criticism, and memoir, Shine Bright is Smith's intimate history of Black women's music as the foundational story of American pop. Smith has been writing this history for more than 5 years. But as a music fan and then as an essayist, editor, and podcast host, she's been living this history since she was a latchkey kid listening to Midnight Train to Georgia on the family stereo. Smith's detailed narrative begins with Phillis Wheatley, an enslaved woman who sang her poems, and continues through the stories of Mahalia Jackson, Dionne Warwick, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, and Mariah Carey, as well as the underconsidered careers of Marilyn McCoo, Deniece Williams, and Jody Watley. Shine Bright is an overdue paean to musical masters whose true stories and genius have been hidden in plain sight, and it is also the book Danyel Smith was born to write. A little bit more about Danyel. She's an author, award-winning journalist, and producer. She's the creator and host of the Spotify exclusive Black Girl Songbook, a music and talk show that centers Black women. A 2021 Yaddo Fellow, Danyel was a senior producer and editor at ESPN and a John S. Knight Journalism Fellow at Stanford, where she co-founded hardcover HRD CVR, an innovative hardcover culture magazine. In addition to writing for NPR, the California Sunday Magazine, The New Yorker, Teen Vogue, and The New York Times, Danyel has served as editor of Billboard, editor at large at Time Inc., and editor in chief of Vibe. The author of two novels, More Like Wrestling and Bliss, Danyel lives in Los Angeles. And sitting in the conversant's chair, we're so pleased to welcome the one, the only, the magnificent Dr. Daphne Brooks today. Daphne Brooks is the William R. Keenan Jr. Professor of African American Studies, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, and Music at Yale University. She's the author of Liner Notes for the Revolution, The Intellectual Life of Black Feminist Sound, Bodies in Dissent, Spectacular Performances of Race and Freedom, 1850 to 1910, and Jeff Buckley's Grace. Inspired by Shine Bright, she'd like to share that her first concert was Frida Payne at Disneyland circa 1971, sitting atop her father's shoulders, and her second was Tony Orlando and Don at the Circle Star Theater. Quite impressive. So after the question, there will be a Q&A, which Francesca will moderate. So please put your questions in the chat, and Francesca will find them there at the end of the discussion. And also feel free to post comments as the discussion's going on. And with that, I'll turn things over to our speakers today, Danyel Smith and Daphne Brooks.
Thank you, Gus Stadler. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Carl Wilson, Eric Weisbard, Francesca Royster, and Gus Stadler for that lovely introduction. Thank you for being hosts of this vibrant gathering. Thank you for creating an online space for us that has carried this community of of thinkers and creatives through the pandemic, which we're still very much in. And congratulations to Weisbard for winning the President's Faculty Research Award at University of Alabama. I mean, there's hard labor that Weisbard has put into creating these communities for us. And so, you know, give it up for EW. Okay, so our distinguished guest author today specifically instructed me not to fangirl out.
Exactly.
Not to wax on and on about the doors that she kicked open for a generation of Black girl dreamers turned writer scholars who found their own voices through listening to hers. The ferocity, the fearlessness, eloquence, and try-me brilliance of a critic who brings everything into the ring with her, leaves it all on the floor. Someone who repeatedly reminds us and announces to the world just how absolutely vital popular musicking is and always has been to Black folks, but particularly to Black girls and Black women who turn to our own sounds as prodigious equipment for living. At the behest of our distinguished guest, I've been forbidden from saying all of that. So I'll simply start off by thanking you, Danyel Smith, for cutting a pioneering path forward in popular music writing that manifests the poignantly rebellious philosophy of one of Toni Morrison's classic characters. In Danyel Smith's writing and in the dazzling Shine Bright, I hear from beginning to end the words of Morrison's renegade heroine Sula saying matter-of-factly, I don't want to make somebody else. I want to make myself. In this new book, she shows us how Black women and girls do that in our everyday lives and in deep conversation with the music that matters to us on the regular. So Danyel Smith, thank you for this gift of a book. Gorgeous, astonishing achievement that it is, and congratulations. And I'm so excited and honored to be in conversation with you today. I stayed in my lane.
You
right?
actually didn't, Daphne. You actually did not. You actually did not.
Come on now. Come on now.
I cannot begin to tell. No, that introduction, please, it has me on the verge of tears. I am humbled and honored to be here. I know I'm amongst friends. I see so many faces from when I was first starting out as a writer on this call, and it's an honor to be here and to talk to you, the genius that is Dr. Daphne, as I like to call her.
Just trying to ride the Oaktown coattails here. So here we are, right?
Yes.
Okay, so as Gus gave to us in the introduction and in the walk-in, there was a little bit of Weisbard, like, we've been waiting, this is happening right now. It's totally thrilling. And as we were discussing yesterday when we chatted a bit, preparing for this gathering, it seems like we were talking about, it seems like one of the best places, at least I was thinking one of the best places to start when discussing the uniqueness, the absolute uniqueness of this book is in the ways that you so seamlessly weave together the personal with pop history. So on the one hand, this is a completely unprecedented meditation on the artistic and cultural contributions of a whole range of Black women pop musicians, the icons, Riri, Whitney, Mariah among them, but also other extraordinary figures, which I'm excited to talk with you about, the Dixie Cups, Stephanie Mills, Deniece Williams, just this beautiful array of sisters who saturated the airwaves and yet have been either overlooked or systemically taken for granted in popular music. We know this, but it's also an exquisite coming of age story steeped in what is, for me, vivid and intoxicating Gen X reflections, post-civil rights era reflections on Black girl into womanhood. And all of that is reflected in the title, A Personal History of Black Women in Pop. So could you start us off by sharing the ways that you approach writing this book from this vantage point? What did the personal provide the room for you to say about the music and vice versa?
Well, I think I realized that I wasn't going to finish the book unless I added myself into it. And because when I first began writing it, it was more encyclopedic. I was going to choose the women who I thought were excellent, and I was going to write biographical profiles of them. I wanted it to be deeply researched and full of detail. I wanted to not write about these women in summary. I wanted to not write about them with regard to how they fall in history as firsts or not. As important as those things are, I just didn't feel like that was my work to do. But the thing is, with that mindset, I was not getting the book done at all. My book is on its second publisher. I am with my second agent on this book because I just really could not finish it. I really couldn't get to the middle of it, if I'm frank. And my editor is Chris Jackson, who is a genius among men. And Chris suggested, in the meanest way, that, and I kid when I say that, but he suggested that I claim my own space, my own story as a Black woman in pop music. And it wasn't as easy as then I just started writing about myself. There was a lot of back and forth between Chris and I, a lot of back and forth between my sister and I, a lot of back and forth between my husband and I. And I just started writing the book from the point of view of it being a very personal history. And then I was able to choose which women were included in the book because they chose me. They were the women that spoke to me and saved my life throughout my entire, not career, but just since I was a little girl, since Jackson 5's ABC. So they had been chosen already. And so I just had to call them up in my imagination and do the research. And I had to do the hardest part, which was to talk about myself and my relationship to music. I had to talk about myself and my relationship to my family. I had to, finally write about some things I had been running from. And as things go, as most of us know, as we get older, when we decide to actually address the things that we are most afraid of for you. And I just wanted it to be really worthy of the women who make the music. I wanted to have myself in the book in a way that didn't in any way take away from their stories, while being very true to my own story. So a number of people have asked me about the weaving in and out of the autobiographical with the biographical. And I wish I could sit here and say that it was just super breezy and it just all happened magically, but I really did put a lot of work into it. I really wanted it to be like seamless, like a song, like harmony and melody, and just those things being layered, in and out of each other. And then, there's rests. I mean, I played flute for a long time. There's codas, there's proper endings, there's a time when, the woodwinds speak up, the percussion speaks up, and I wanted it to kind of function like that. I like to write toward the way I hear things in my head, and when I read things out loud, and time on this or too little time on that. And I just, especially for the last year and a half after I was able to resign from ESPN and work on the book full time, I really just put the work in to tell as many stories as I could, as well as I could. Nonsense, but kind of like a tapestry, you know what I mean?
Come on.
Kind of like a tapestry, one of my favorite
Winter,
albums.
spring, summer, and fall.
Winter, spring, summer, and fall, all of that. Just trying to live up to those kinds of moments of just, when you think about the kind of work, even that Carole King did to get that album to happen, and for that album to be one of the most successful and awarded and remembered, and one of the most influential records from a woman in pop, ever.
Yes.
When I think about Way Over Yonder, also something is in an earlier draft of Shine Bright is my relationship to Way Over Yonder and what that song means to me. So yeah, you just want to rise to these occasions.
It's so deeply lyrical. I've said many times, I'm sure I'll say it more than once today, it was a book that I didn't want to end like a banger. I I wanted to live inside of that lyricism for so many different reasons. I'm also interested in the shine bright part of the title that we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, the book was called Other Things. I think of the title that stuck the longest was like, I'm every woman, or we're every woman, or something about every woman, because the relationship that Shaka and Whitney have to that record, and that I have to it. But as the book evolved, Shine Bright just began to make a lot more sense to me and began to speak more to just the spirit of the book. It's straightforward for me. Shine Bright means two things in this case.
Yes.
It stands for the song, This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine. I really don't care who's singing it. I don't care if I'm singing it, if Daphne's singing it, I don't care if Eric's singing it, doesn't make a difference. The song is just a miracle. It's a song that a lot of little Black girls sing as their first solo or as a part of a children's choir in church. We all learned it. I learned it at Seventh-day Adventist Day Camp, so it's everywhere. I love it. Every little where I go, I'm gonna let it shine. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, simple classic of a song. And then obviously it's Shine Bright Like a Diamond from Rihanna. Those two songs are tied together to me. One is an affirmation, one is a command. They're both asking the same. And so that's where we landed on Shine Bright.
Yeah, I mean, it's so gorgeous to think about that song in relation to the title, in relation to the narrative that you give us, which is such a journey in part in laying claim to one's personal worth, and really not only celebrating it, but luxuriating in it and finding all of the deepness and richness and complexity of one's own selfhood. It's just gorgeous. You know, I'm curious too about those figures in the book who, unlike the icons, as we were just, you know, kind of alluding to, you know, represent this whole range of Black musicality and innovation on the part of Black women musicians that has been overlooked for so long. Folks like Cissy Houston, Jody Watley, Marilyn McCoo, Peaches, right? And, you know, in terms of thinking about worth, I'm kind of fascinated in the why and the how you became drawn to these artists as a part of your own story, and also the part of the story of pop music history that you wanted to be able to break, I feel like, break open in this book.
I mean, Daphne, you and I have discussed this probably not just yesterday, but generally. I didn't know if the world needed an Aretha Franklin book from me. I didn't know if the world, there's an award-winning best-selling Mariah Carey book that exists by Michelangelo Davis. That's just a genius level, you know, memoir.
Yes.
I didn't think the world needed that for me. I have my place with those women, but I wanted to talk about some very specific songs and women that meant stuff to me, that meant things to my mother and my mother's sister, that meant things to my grandmother. That is my era.
Yes.
I mean, I'm gonna have to start claiming my niece and nephew's eras. I cannot believe that is true, but it is. But it's my era. So, you know, I grew up hearing Going to the Chapel on the radio. I heard it. It was the old school of like my mother's 30s. I'm in the car. And Going to the Chapel was just a perfect record. And I feel that no one ever talks about it. How it got built, where those girls came from, the segregated, you know, New Orleans, Louisiana that they grew up in, the green dresses that they were known for wearing when they were performing. I just feel like these things going to write about the Dixie Cups. The world is going to see them, you know, and I decided very intentionally that, as it says at the beginning of the Diana Ross chapter, it's very difficult not to write about the Supremes. It's hard, it's difficult. There's been so much great work done about the Supremes. Some of the people that have done great work about those Supremes are on this call. Okay, so, but I felt like I didn't need to write about the Supremes. And aside from that, I didn't need to write about the Supremes because the Diana Ross of my life is her disco era. It's her solo era, which I feel everyone acts like did not actually occur.
Which is a shame. It's a
Which is a
crime,
whole
really.
shame.
Crime.
Which is a whole shame.
Yeah.
When her records contribute even so much to rap music, and some of the biggest records in rap, 10, 12, 15 years later. So I wanted to write about Diana as herself, and not so much as a part of the Supreme. So, Jody Watley, I wanted to write about, man, people like Millie Small, Suzanne DePass, Millie Small, who, was at the beginning of Island Records, before Marley, before everybody, making those big ska records that provided a foundation for reggae's, place in the world. So I just feel like, when is anybody writing about that? When are they writing about that? The mashed potato time, right? When is that happening? And I felt like we did a lot of that work at Vibe. I was inspired by a lot of that work. These are the kind of things and people that we paid attention to there as well. So I just felt like, let's go.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes. Yeah. How do we resist and intervene in the soft bigotry of, maybe not soft, the bigotry of exceptionalism, right? How do we talk about, Vasquez would put it,
Yes.
and specifically in relation to these artists' lives?
Yes, it's so important to me. We stressed this at Vibe. It was stressed to Alan by Jonathan Van Meter. It was stressed by Alan to me. It has been stressed to me by Fletcher Roberts at the New York Times. It has been stressed to me by Diane Carwell, who was at Vibe, who was now at the New York Times. I think she's still there. Is that it's not enough to just, for me, and for the kind of work I like doing, it's not enough to just write about people in summary. I have always resisted it. I've always been trained to go to a show and review the show so that other people can feel like they were at the show. And you do that by seeing what the velvet felt like in the seats that people were standing on. That's what you do. So to me, I want to write about, what were we doing? What were the Shirelles telling the Dixie Cups about the wigs that they should buy? Yes. What was the right hair for the right venue, girl? Because this one gets too hot for this kind of hair. I always tell the story of, I don't know if Anne's the caller for me, to whoever wrote about my Mariah Carey profile. This is 4,000 years ago. This is back when dinosaurs were roaming the earth, when Anne and I were super beautiful and running the whole town. Not that we're not still, but we were running the whole town. And somebody wrote, I think it was in the Village Voice, that, Danyel Smith wants people to, I'm paraphrasing, Danyel Smith wants us to take the music of Mariah Carey seriously, but yet she spends the whole first 2 paragraphs speaking about Mariah's hair. Yeah. Man, let me tell you, my feelings were hurt. This is when I was to break through. And Anne said, I don't know where she said it, but she said it publicly and in writing, that how ridiculous it was for that person to have said that, because hair is a part of who Mariah is, number one. And number two, we've been talking about hair and rock from the beginning of time. Since the Beatles had the floppy bangs, to the hair bands, to Bon Jovi, to what kind of pomade. We can't sit up and talk about Mariah's hair for 2 paragraphs. I'm blessed to have people like Anne in my network.
Aren't we all?
Spiritual network.
That's right.
My writing sisterhood.
Yes. You also talked about, and it's so striking in the book, the ways in which it was very important to you to write about birth, where people were born.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
We just use that as such a everything is about where a person was born, what year they were born in. This person was born at this time, born on this day is always a trending topic. And I'm always like, we're always talking about women when we say that, though. We never really acknowledge the fact that when we're saying that a person is born, they were literally being pushed out of some woman's womb on that day. And I feel like, why don't we write about those circumstances? We just don't. We don't write about the hospitals that these women were born in or weren't born in, the segregated situations that they were born in or not born in. I write at length in Shine Bright about the life of Marilyn McCoo. I could not figure out when I'm researching Marilyn McCoo how she keeps talking about she's from the South, but she's born in Jersey.
Right.
Never, I'm trying to put that together. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And finally, she said herself to me that her mother took the train up from Georgia every pregnancy when we got almost to delivery, because she did not trust the hospitals in the state of Georgia to deliver her children. And she came from a family of doctors. They were upper middle class Black family. And they had the means for her to get on the train, go up to New Jersey, go to a good hospital with a Black gynecologist, have the baby, let the baby get healthy enough and strong enough, and get back on the train and go back down to Georgia. Like, my whole thing is, why do we never talk about that when we just use shorthand to discuss Marilyn McCoo as, I don't know, just like that lady from the Fifth Dimension who performed at the Nixon White House.
Right.
Listen,
Instead of the entire path, the arc, right? It gets her to the White House.
She has more Grammys than most, man.
Right,
She has more.
right.
I think she has 5 Grammys.
Yes.
It's 5. It's really not even that many people that have 5 Grammys, especially between 2 different groups, Fifth Dimension and the duo she's in with her husband. So I'm not really a huge fan of the Nixon administration, but I'm just saying, can we just discuss Marilyn in her wholeness is all I'm saying.
Wholeness, fullness, the deep socio-historical materiality means by which she manifests herself appears to us. Yes.
It's very, Marilyn McCoo chapter is one of my favorite chapters. I feel like she's on a lot of people's documentary. The interview I had with her, man, listen, she was so crisp and about her time, like, she didn't have time for anything, but you better have some good lessons, questions for me, Miss Ma'am. Like, listen, but she blessed me with, I don't even think it was an hour. And I did loads and loads of research about her, and she's just about the Fifth Dimension and about the way they were singing Aquarius at Woodstock, and they didn't even book the Fifth Dimension, but they were singing the song, the whole, I don't know, 500,000 people they had at Woodstock. Yes. They just spontaneously began singing the song after Joe Cocker said, like, please, but we don't want to put any respect on Marilyn McCoo's name. I'm saying I do, and so does Questlove, clearly.
You do that, and then, in reference to Joe Cocker, you build this moment around a through line between his backup singers, right? And the richness of how we understand Black women's vocality in these spaces in which, as you've referred to, hidden in plain sight.
They're super hidden. I mean, it's there with Cocker, but it's there with so many people that is it Van Morrison, like Shana not like that is the thing that got me the most is when the Counting Crows practically remade that song. Let's not act like they didn't. No shots, no shade. Like really just wire chorus, and that's really the Sweet Inspirations. Like, come on, that's Whitney Houston's mother.
Yeah.
And basically, like, her girls from around the way. It was always Sissy and like whoever was available. I feel like it was just like whoever was at the hair salon or something. It's like, come with me real quick. Elvis needs somebody on background. It's like, what the hell? And there's not even a proper list that exists on this earth of every record that they are part of. I found David Nathan wrote the liner notes for a box set about the Sweet Inspirations, and he says in the liner notes, he's like, I'm out here really trying to find it. And believe me, if David Nathan doesn't know, it's probably not known.
Right.
And he's like, listen, there's not a complete list.
Yes.
So we don't even know every place they show up or gave advice or inspired. I believe that the Sweet Inspirations literally inspired the whole second half, the comeback of Elvis Presley's career. I do. And also that's why I think that as much as we have to deal with Elvis's politics and the things he did or didn't say about Black people, we also have to acknowledge a couple of things. Like, Elvis has a lot of Black fans. And also, if we are holding Elvis out as somebody that we can't like, then I think we should probably look at the Elvises that are currently among us, don't we? So, I
You
mean,
said nothing but a word.
I'm just saying,
You ain't said nothing but a
I'm
word.
just saying, like Blue Christmas, I could not get through my holiday season without that. And invitations.
Yes.
It's like, I was raised on it. Elvis pop, which is why the book is about pop.
Yes.
That's why I said that, because I didn't want anybody to feel like I don't know or recognize people who don't necessarily go gold, don't necessarily sell out arenas, don't necessarily have songs on a Billboard's hot, hip hop radio play chart or whatever. Because those women are, man, they're working hard.
Yes, they are working hard.
Yes.
I mean, work and labor are a big part of this book that I want to talk with you about.
Yes.
But I also, since you brought up the charts, I do want to ask you about this, because another really felt like consistency in the book that seemed very pointed and powerful was the kind of granular detail that you bring to talking about chart success and what these sisters are doing on the charts. And I kept thinking, okay, here's our pioneering, groundbreaking Billboard editorial genius who has a particular kind of knowledge about what that kind of currency means in the recording industry. And I'm just getting interested in hearing you share with us the why and the how of what it meant for you to include that kind of information we're trying to get across.
Yeah, I feel like a good little double agent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm inside of Billboard. I'm also outside of Billboard. I love Billboard. Billboard's charts are, they started out completely segregated. The Black charts were called the race charts, and they were called worse than that. The N-word charts and all that, colloquially, all that was going on. I know about the pre-SoundScan era when Billboard representatives would just call record stores and ask them, so what records are selling in your store today? Yes. And, people could just be lying, and did. And then we get into SoundScan and things seem, way more democratic. And that's when country and rap come to the fore, and it's amazing. But I don't even know if Eric knows this, but Eric is quoted in my book. He's quoted in Shine Bright, talking about how America's Top 40 is not America's Top 40 if it ever was. It just isn't. And the thing is, I've been around so many people, and not just women, like Luther Vandross. I write about Gerald Levert's being brokenhearted his whole life for never having a #1 pop hit, because it's such an accomplishment. It's the People's Choice Award. Like, it says, I'm speaking to everybody. It says, my little light is shining on everyone, and it's just kind of awful that it's so hard when I think of a song like At Last from Etta James, which is one of the most popular wedding songs in the history of music. And it really never got, I believe, above number 42 or 41 or something like that on the chart. And I that suspiciously, I have no proof. But I just can't imagine that record didn't break top 20, top 10 at least. Right. It's just very difficult, just from my experience and research, and even just my ear, to say, so At Last wasn't a top 10 record, but yet it has stood all of this test of time. Right. It's still on all radio stations. People are still requesting it and getting married to it, having 15th anniversary, 20th anniversaries to it. But Etta could never have that. And everybody's always like, I wonder why Etta was always on heroin. I wonder why Donna Summer was always so depressed when everybody's telling her her music doesn't mean anything. It's not real. So
I was just going to say that's another form of witnessing that I feel that your book gives to us, right? Is to be here and stand in this place and try to contest the value of this music, how it resonates in all of these different registers, how it provides meaning and connection and possibly
it ties us together. What's your jam? Daphne, what's your jam?
Oh,
I'm
which
just,
jam? What are you talking
I'm
about?
saying whatever your jam is, I'm gonna
Paean.
find a way in. It connects
Is it
us. Okay, Daphne,
okay?
okay, let me flip it on
Band
you
of
then.
Gold.
What's your
Band
jam?
of
What
Gold,
is
2
your
years
jam from
old at
Donna Summer?
Disneyland.
Daphne, let's go.
Oh, it's Bad Girls.
Okay, now see, this is the thing about Bad Girls to me. One, it's not my favorite Donna Summer song, but I get why it's such a great record. But I will say this, I always wonder, speaking of Rihanna, her name is Bad Gal Riri. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, see, I'm not saying there's a connection, but in my mind, it's a connection.
Yeah.
I just don't, I'm like the cops on SVU. I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences like that. I don't. You were at the scene of the crime, Rihanna. Your mother was probably very much listening to Donna Summer. Come on.
Very much.
Yes, let's go.
Come on now.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now I want to go back and relitigate Donna Summer for myself. Bad Girls, when it first came out, because it was the taboo thing for me to sing, and Juanita Catherine Watson Brooks in Menlo Park, California. Shout out to Juanita.
Shout out to Menlo Park.
Next month, right?
Yes.
Would tell me, don't sing that song, right? So that was, but then there's MacArthur Park, which,
I love that record.
you need like the big,
it's a big one.
The big living room karaoke kind of moments,
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about making a living, since that's a jam that we'll have to come back to. But in the context of this book, another barrier breaking, unprecedented thing that this book does is to really piece together this kind of extended narrative about the on the ground everyday labor and vision, creativity and hustle of a Black woman arts critic and pioneering editor. In the second half of the book, there's a really striking narrative that emerges about the professional opportunities in particular that you navigated in these roles, as well as the sometimes unbelievable on the ground challenges you faced working on and overseeing celebrity profiles, engaging with artists as journalists. I mean, you offer the reader some stop in your tracks, like an Oscar slap moments inside of that world that we rarely get to see and hear and witness. But I want to also emphasize that we rarely get these kinds of detailed narratives about the professional life of a music critic and an editor as a narrative, let alone a Black woman arts critic. And so I'm just interested in how you approached writing that and why that was an important part of the narrative for you, because it could have been an entirely personal and not just professional narrative.
No, it's true. Let me preface this by saying I've been around, so there's that part of it. When Chris Lighty died, I wrote his obit, and I was like the guy who's most familiar with his main life takes place in hotel lobbies and backstages, right? Yes. And I spent a lot of my life in hotel lobbies and a lot of my professional life in backstages, in Critics Row, as it used to be called. Those kinds of things. And my thing is, one, people should know about that. It makes things possible for other people. Yes. That's one of the main parts. But the other part is because, like I say at the beginning of Shine Bright, I want to be known and understood. And so, I feel like, I guess maybe we all feel this way sometimes. I feel like, people don't really even know me that well. But, some of that is my fault. I'm not out here just trying to make myself known. So I figured it was time to make myself known. And also just like, I think it humanizes. I did it mostly with Janet, Mariah, and Whitney because I've interviewed all three of them. And those three women having, these are the towers of pop music. And so I wanted to talk about how I don't know what people think happens. Like you go for the interview and everything goes perfect, everybody loves it. And then like, no, that is not how it goes. There's negotiations, there's curse outs, there's should I do it? There's my ego, there's their ego, there's clothes, there's makeup, there's There's everything. There's the negotiating with mainstream white publicists about Black artists. Is just, I'm like, if I don't write it down, who's gonna write it down?
Yes.
I want Corey Murray in essence needs to do the same thing, man. Corey's life is a movie. We're out here, some of us, trying to do it. It's just that when do we have time to write it down? Because we always write it down about somebody else. Yeah. So I feel like it was my turn to just say, this is what happened. This is what happened with Whitney Houston and myself. Mm-hmm. This is how she impacted my life, not just professionally, but personally. Yeah. Same with Janet and the same with Mariah. I'll never forget when Mariah told me I could have the story, mm-hmm. but she was in a remote location. Right. And I was like, because I was in New York, mm-hmm. I figured she was, I don't know, upstate somewhere or something. And she was like, no, it's remote. You've never heard of it, but if you can get here. Then I was like, well, oh shit, where are you at? She said, you've never heard of it. I was like, I want to say, sis, I've heard of a lot of places. She said she was in Sonoma County. I said, listen.
Like, what?
I said, listen to me.
Come on.
I said, girl, I think I'm gonna figure it out. I think I'm going to like, what? Oh. It was a great night though, man. It was a great night. It was like a great night. And that's the thing, I talked about it a little bit, maybe even in the piece that I wrote at the time, but not everything, not meeting Destiny's Child at one of Mariah's parties when she had specifically asked for Destiny's Child. It's like, come on.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, you have to drop the book, walk around the room and come back. Oh my God.
Oh my God, they were and I never named the person, right, that introduced me to them and who brought them in. Not. And I shall never, oh no, I have swallowed the key.
Oh my God.
I can't remember who I was talking to, and they said they found it very interesting who I named and who I didn't.
That's true.
I say it's intentional.
That's true. But like, it's just you laying bare all the labor that goes into the culture that we consume, and real creative labor, as well as professional mm-hmm. labor. I mean, having to really figure out the sociality of these spaces and navigate them, gracefully, with bravery and fortitude. I mean, it's extraordinary.
I try to talk about it, Daphne.
But let's hold on to
just being, I am that girl from East Oakland.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go now.
That's the thing. It's like,
let's talk about it.
I am that girl from.
Come on now.
83rd and East 14th.
Come on now.
9th and MacArthur, and every second city has those intersections.
Yes.
Right? And mm-hmm. I'm that girl who was at the bus stop on those intersections. Me and my sister. Right. And I didn't have my degree until I was 36, 37, 38.
Shout out to UC Berkeley.
Yes. And no, but I went there first, but my degrees aren't from there, from the new school. I went at night as editor-in-chief. Don't mess with me. I stay busy, man.
That's a real thing.
But I guess what to say is that I was always a little bit perturbed by the fact that I think people thought I was a bit hood for my job. Mm. And I carry that even now. Wow. Because I'm very, I'm being such a ESPN professional right now on this call, and it's lovely.
Hey!
And it's lovely. No, it's lovely, and I'm good at it, and it's fine. But what I'm trying to say is when I was in my late 20s and early 30s and trying to be a music critic at the New York Times and trying to be a music editor at Vibe and trying to sit front row at shows in Milan and doing all these things that I was doing back then, I was still that same chick from 83rd and East 14th. Yeah. And so it just was not, it just was not easy. It's still not, to be honest. We all carry what we carry.
We all carry what we carry. We bring it into how we write and what we write about. And it was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about how Bay Area strong this narrative is.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, in all facets of your professional work, from the podcast, which I want to talk with you about.
Yes, California, the Bay Area and California, period. Like, it's one thing to say I'm from 83rd and East 14th because I am. but it's also something else to say that there's something very special and wonderful about one, being from East Oakland, but there's also something very special and wonderful about being from California.
Yes.
And reminding people just by my existence that California girls aren't all blonde in bikinis. Some of them are wearing orange sweaters on a, what is today, Tuesday afternoon. So that California strong, Bay Area strong thing is real. And I came out of a scene. And I know I keep mentioning Eric and Ann, but I've known them since I was like a child. And Ann and writers that made me understand that you could talk about a scene as a thing, that you could name it, and you could talk about its rules and regulations, and you could talk about what the style of it was and where everybody went and what everybody talked about and how everybody wore their hair. I had not really seen that until Gina Arnold, the great Gina Arnold, who used to write a great column for the East Bay Express called Fools Rush In. And that enabled me to say, well, I could do that about rap. I could do that because I just felt like I could do that about rap in Oakland, about music in Oakland. So I was blessed to come out of that scene feeling like I had so much swag. Like, how could you talk to me about who I wasn't in New York? When I was like, you guys can, shout out to Eric B. and Rakim, but MC Hammer is selling like millions and millions and millions and millions of records and taking hip hop worldwide. So all of this that you're talking to me about how special Queens and Brooklyn is, let me just remind you about Oakland, please, because we don't just have Hammer, we have Too Short, we have Digital Underground with Tupac, we have In Vogue, we have the Tonys, we have 8 zillion other rap groups that never became as famous as they should have been. So I really did have that chip on my shoulder for the good and for the bad, I think, and probably still do, if I'm honest with myself. Maybe it gets lighter as I get older. Oh, it's definitely still, the chip is just there. Like, if you come from the hood, if you're from around the way, it's just, what are you gonna do? Like, you carry that with you. And sometimes it's such a source of joy. And sometimes it's like, how am I gonna get through this fucking meeting? And there's East Oakland for you right there.
But it also infuses the ways in which you write so vividly and so intensely with so much passion and precision about time and place. So we're there with you getting on the Bay Bridge and hearing "Miss You Much" for the first time.
It was a moment.
Shout out to Theo Mizahara on KMEL. I mean, it
was like, a moment.
Look,
he totally milked it. He milked it for like 6 hours. Shout out to Theo wherever he is. I hated him so much that day.
Oliver's been looking for him. We've all been looking for him.
Where's Theo? Yeah. So yeah, man, it's just, I think it's important to ground music like that. Like, I just think it's because music can be so, it sounds, you can't even see it, you know? So I want to ground it to the Bay Bridge that day. I want to ground it to the street in which, you know, it was first heard on. I want to ground, I want people to know just really, not just what it felt like, but what were we all doing when it came out? Who was the mayor at that time? How many murders were going on in Oakland when Digital Underground was busy making the Humpty Dance? Like, how does that, like, how are you living in a town where they're counting murders 100 plus in Oakland, and you're finding the time to have a whole, like, what do you call it? Like a whole different persona, right? From Greg Jacobs to Shock G to Humpty Hump. And this is where your imagination goes. This is what you're doing, because on the news, and maybe not because of, but just you're in this space where it's always on the news in the background that somebody else got shot.
Yeah.
Like, you have to ground it in that, or else what are we doing? And there's nothing wrong with sitting up and talk about your favorite record.
Yes.
Lord knows my husband and I do that. We could do that right now as I get off this call. Yes. But professionally and in service to fans in a community of listeners, that's not enough for me, Danielle, to speak about just, well, I like this record because it's enough for a lot of people, but for me, it's my life. So I'm gonna tell you where it went down and what was going on in the town at the time.
And carry us back. I mean, it was like a time machine for me. I mean, I just in the most beautiful ways. I know that there's so many people who want to ask you questions.
All
I
right.
think maybe the last question I'll ask you is about the podcast, one of the most popular, one of the most brilliant, one of the most beloved podcasts of this moment, Black Girl Songbook. I'm interested in how you think about the podcast in relation to this book. Are there things that you're able to do in the podcast that you weren't able to do in the book, or vice versa? How do we understand these two incredible projects in your career right now coming together and complementing each other?
One, thank you for that. I love doing Songbook. It's the joy of my life, as is Shine Bright. Songbook came out of Shine Bright. When I was finished writing it, I was like, okay, well, I still have things to say. So I need to figure out something. I wrote a proposal and I ended up with the great people at The Ringer. Shout out to Sean Finnessy over there. Sean Finnessy, who's the head of The Ringer. Sean Finnessy was music editor at Vibe when I was editor-in-chief for the second time. So Sean and I go way, way back. It's great to be in business with people who know you and who know what you're capable of and beyond. So I'm blessed to be over there. But I just wanted to talk more about the things in Shine Bright. But the thing that's so great about Songbook is that you can play music.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the thing. It was so funny because when I sent Sean the pitch, he was like, did you know we're doing this like initiative, this music plus? I was like, no. And he was like, serendipitous as always, Miss Wilson. So because they're doing a thing where you could play a whole song. So to be able to talk about a song or a singer or a singer-songwriter, an artist, and then just be able to pull up a 10-second snippet or say, hey, guess what? We're gonna play the entire song for you. That's like magical to me. That's like dream come true. So I love it. And people are responding to it really well. So I just feel really grateful about it.
We're grateful that you're doing this work and witnessing for us. We're grateful for your voice, Danyel Smith.
Thank you, Daphne. And can I just say though, also before we get to the questions, which I want to know because I'm nosy, but you always paint me as hero, and I'm just going to say this back at you, sis. Don't.
We're not doing this.
Daphne,
we're not.
I won't.
No,
I'm
we're
just going to tell
totally
you
not.
right now. Daphne, no, seriously. As I talked about Anne and Gina and etc., I will say that did she put herself on mute? I cannot. I will not. I'm going to say it to the room. Daphne said to me with her work, you can take it seriously. It's a real subject that we teach up at the big smart schools. We teach it up at the Princeton and we teach it up at the Yale.
With a whole bunch of other fugitives.
No, leave it, sit in it. I'm going to questions. I'm just going to tell you that you helped me. And you are my hero as well.
All here. The court is here to serenade you and ask questions of you.
Okay,
like a Bridgerton breakdown. Our Black Queen.
Excellent.
Come on now, Francesca.
I'm ready. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, this was just such a great conversation. I am fangirling for sure. The first question is from Anne. And did you want to ask about writing, the triple axis moves of writing of Danielle's work?
Hello, heroes.
Oh, hey, there she is. There she is.
So I know this is something that many people are doing these days, but you did it so masterfully in this book, balancing personal narrative with deeply researched and interview-based research. And structurally, I mean, it's something I do in my work as well. I'm doing in my current project. It's challenging, to get that balance right, to get the rhythms right, and not make it seem like a strange, weird creature with like limbs attached that shouldn't be there, So talk a little bit about structure and your process. This is my craft question for you on this book.
Well, one thing I should say is, like I said, it started out being purely biographical about the women, the Black women in music. And then when it was decided, and I say that passively because I feel like that's almost kind of how it happened, that I would include myself in my story. it was not just coming to me. It wasn't just like, okay, so now let me just add me. So something that was suggested to me by my editor was to just write a short essay that was just basically titled Danyel Smith, My Life in Music. And that ended up being about 40,000 words. And so
The short.
it enabled me to see patterns. It enabled me to see who my favorites really were. It enabled me to see places where a weave could take place. You know what I mean? It enabled me to say, well, we're talking about Diana Ross, how in this 40,000 word document, I had written a lot about hearing Diana Ross at my mom's parties in the 70s and how the crowd at the parties were so loving the music and hating her, basically. And so I was like, so why wouldn't this seem then the perfect place for me to write about those parties? Because those parties affected me, man. Those parties affected me. Those parties look fun. They made you want to grow up, you know? So that I think that helped me, was just getting it all down and not, because I think I had 5 or 6 chapters like kind of done that I had to actually weave myself into work that was already pretty well done. But then the other 10 chapters, like the biggest chapter is the Whitney Aretha, I guess is the biggest chapter. That's all kind of from scratch in my mind, where I'm weaving myself into the story from inception, from thought. And once I got that done, then I feel like I had a better handle on it, because I started just really, a large part of it for me, Anne, was just this. I really just had that, by that point, started to believe that my stories were interesting. It's so awful, like that we all live these wild, great, fun lives, and then are sitting up in a room by ourselves like, so does anybody want to hear that time I saw Bobby Brown almost fight Don King? It's like, sis, everybody wants to hear that. You know what I mean? But I couldn't get right with it for a while. But once I had written that long document, it also just contributed to my confidence and say, let me start at the Regal Royal Hotel. I've told this story at the bar for 15 years.
Yes.
But let me actually research it. Let me actually tell the story. Let me bring Gerald in. It's weird to bring Gerald in, but Gerald he's indicative of the whole thing of wanting to go pop. He's indicative of how small the Black music world is. And so it just gave me the confidence to do it. So it was a big challenge though, and I appreciate you asking me that.
Yeah, I remember just on the Whitney point, when you were writing, I think your first feature on Whitney, you were in it. You were in it then, and you knew things, you had heard things you couldn't put in that story.
Yes.
And so it's so fun to see it, come to this place now. It's just beautiful.
Yes. Thank you. And the years go by. See, that's the thing too. The years go by.
The truth.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's so good to see your face.
Chris, do you want to ask your question on pop? That's
Hey, first of all, I love that entirely organically, without even consulting each other, Anne and I both decided that Donna Summer's great song is Dim All the Lights. I just want to state that for the record.
It is a great record though.
Hear, hear.
Yes.
Second, I feel like I'm monopolizing Danielle's time because she was kind enough to be my guest on my most recent hit parade, The Bridge. And I want to thank you again for that because you were an amazing guest.
Oh, I had so much fun.
God bless. So the question I asked in the comments was, I love the emphasis on pop in your book subtitle. You mentioned this earlier, and I also am enriched by the conversation we're having about the fifth dimension, and what just was, the discussion that came out of Questlove's documentary last year, this conversation about the fifth dimension and how we regard that group in R&B versus pop and what that means.
Yeah.
And in my latest Hit Parade episode, you and I talked a little bit about this. I confronted some of these preconceived notions around Dionne Warwick, Roberta Flack, whether they were soulful enough, whether they were too pop. How did you in Shine Bright, how are you looking, you put it right in the title, you put pop in the title. How are you looking to combat these preconceived notions in this reductive shorthand? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, one, I'll say this, I feel like I've spent my career doing that. I don't believe in pop as a sound. I don't. I do not believe in pop as an actual sound. I believe in pop as of Billboard and it comes from radio. It's an idea. It's made up. I don't believe when people say it has a poppy sound. I'm always like, so do you mean that it's well enunciated? Because that's what it used to mean. I don't know what it means now. And I just feel like it's just so convenient that in the era, the 80s, that Black pop made its biggest strides, way bigger than Motown even, with the Motown runaways like Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and then with Whitney Houston, like just when Black people were becoming the biggest stars in music, pop became a bad word. And they were being told by critics that you were not being who you're supposed to be. And just like with the whole disco sucks movement and stuff like that, to me, I just always viewed it as a big message from the mainstream to stand down. Very similar to when hip hop was rising. Hip hop is fake, it's not real music, it's this, that, and the third. It's like, okay, but that's just not true if you look at the numbers though. Hip hop is pop music, it's hip hop actually. And I don't attach a negative to that. Like I said, I believe in pop as being the people's choice. At Billboard, I say this all the time, Billboard, the Grammys, all these things, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I talk about a lot in Shine Bright, these are all flawed metrics, but they are the metrics that we have. And my thing is, let's just keep it to pre-streaming era. Pre-streaming era is this, it's how many records people bought, it's how many times your record was played on the radio. And a lot of that stemmed from back then, actual real live people, not bots, calling radio stations and saying, can you please play this song for me? So my thing is, it's the people's choice. It's sales and it was airplay. Those are huge things, especially when people were buying hard records at $15.99 a pop. Nobody had that kind of money, and yet we were spending it on that, unless you were Columbia, record club as I was for 10 records for a penny. But I'm just saying, so I don't believe in pop as a sound. I believe in it as a segregated space, to be honest with you. I do. I think that, no, it just means, to be short with it, it means Black people got popular. Rock isn't necessarily, rock is not a rock. Like it wasn't meant like anything else to just be the thing forever after. Hip hop is not going to exist as it has existed for the last 40 years, the next 40 years. And I'm gonna have to sit down and shut my mouth and be mad about it, I guess, but it's just not going to be. Right. Like it changed, deal with it. Hip hop is pop, Black music is pop, some rock is still pop, but like stop. Oh my God, I'm from the hip hop generation. Is that wrong? Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you. I hope we can talk again. It's always fun talking to you.
Likewise.
Yes.
I love that hip hop is pop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. I think Antonia had a couple of questions. Antonia, if you want to.
Okay, Antonia, where you at, sis?
Yeah, I'm right here. I was mouthing off mostly, hey, so they weren't all questions. I was fangirling about, I read you in Vibe and was thinking about Tina Lester and all those other folks, Joe Morgan, yes. All those other folks that, made it possible for me to be a hip hop scholar today. So I wanted to say that. But my question was,
it's appreciated.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to talk about the different listening practices today than in your era, my era, where radio was so central to how people related to music. Do you think that the decline in radio listening as a sort of commonplace where people got their music information might affect music journalism so that there's more people are getting their musical taste more from streaming or recommendations, not from radio? How might that change the kind of writing people do, since radio was so central to how you came up and developed your sort of taste and what you wanted to write about?
Yeah, it's like for me, it's a great question. For me, it's like you know, it's like we hate the tastemakers, we hate the gatekeepers, but then sometimes they were helpful. You know what I mean? I myself was a tastemaker and a gatekeeper. I tried to keep the gates open, but I'm sure in many's opinion, I did not. I had my favorites, or put on the cover who, you know, we thought should be on the cover and those kinds of things. But as it relates to radio and music journalism, I would say everything that happens in music affects music journalism. Like, it just does. Like, I feel like the way that I heard music as compared to how my mother heard music is just completely different. It was so much more rare for her to just, one, have the time. It wasn't like a pastime for her generation or my grandmother's as much as it was for us. I think she was very much about the radio in her teen years, but more, I think, about small, inexpensive record players and friends coming over and listening to and bringing their records over. So then you would have a whole bunch of different people's playlists, right, over at somebody's grandmother's house or in their basement, and everybody would just play records. So to me, the journalism has to shift with the times in any situation. Like, I think it's kind of criminal, actually, that I want more journalism about playlists. Playlists fascinate me. I want more journalism about playlists. I want more journalism, music journalism about music and gaming. I want more journalism about this thing that happens at TikTok, where people are mouthing the words of songs that are both popular and just random lyrics that seem to rise up, right, in a particular moment for a particular reason. Like, all this kind of stuff, I try to write about it, and it's just like, sure, Dan, that was sweet, but really somebody 30 should really try to jump in this and like go super deep with the experiential. Like, I can talk about it from like, oh yeah, I was on TikTok with my nephew and he showed me this, and it'll be cute. You know what I mean? People will say, "Oh, good job, Danamo." But if you do it or your cohort does it, you are living this. As we were talking earlier about scenes, this is y'all scene. I want to know the rules and regulations and the terms and conditions of what you all are doing. Like, my thing is just go harder than you think you should. And I know you out here you called yourself a hip hop scholar, so I know that you were out here doing the most research and stuff like that. But we've been talking a lot about the personal, put the experiential part in there too. Have the rigor, but have the passion. I hope that helps.
Jacqueline, you were gonna ask your question.
Oops. Hi.
Hey, Jacqueline.
Hi, how you doing? First of all, I just want to let you know that I'm a big fan of Girl Songbook. I noticed that we got new episodes, so I can't wait to listen to them. And I actually, you were saying that you were going to almost title your book, which, you know, congratulations on the book. I'm Every Woman. And actually, my dissertation is called "I'm Every Woman" because it explores intersectionality in the music industry. So,
okay.
Yeah. So my question for you is that I'm looking to write. You know, one of the big goals for me is to write my first book. What is your advice for somebody like me who's looking to write a book?
So you decided you were going to come to the group with like the hardest question? That's your role in the day? The hell? I don't know. I barely got mine done, but no, it's just such a commitment. It's just like a big project. You know, I found myself swimming around in the middle of it, thinking it was never going to get done, but you just kind of got to stay committed. Like, I really feel like that's the main thing. I think if you want to write a book, you're probably already a pretty good writer. You probably have a good voice. You probably need to narrow your subject down, whatever your subject may be, to narrow it down, you know, as much as you can whittle it down to, you know, go deep as opposed to wide, that kind of thing.
Right.
But those are the kind of things, you know, you could pick up in any good creative writing class or narrative nonfiction class. To me, the main thing is just remaining committed to your story. And even your story might change in the middle, as mine did. But just like committed to like the project, I think is what I mean to say. Like just saying, like you're saying, I want to write my first book. First of all, I love that you're saying you want to write your first one as opposed to a book. It means you're trying to write multiple, which is dope. But just you got to stay committed, because everybody's gonna try to talk you out of it. You're gonna try to talk yourself out of it. But
right, for sure.
Yes, it's like, why am I doing this? And am I getting enough money for it? Is anybody going to be interested?
That's my biggest, my biggest question is like, is anybody going to read this? I mean, I'm excited.
Everybody, listen, it's probably about 8, 9, 12 people on this call with books, and we all don't even know if the people are interested in our books now that are out. So you can't even let that be the reason. And if you're passionate, look at that great smile. If you're passionate, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Just like I was just saying to the previous person, the hip hop scholar, if you have the rigor, you should have that. But the passion and the rigor to me is a sweet spot. That's the good intersection.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's nice to meet you.
Same here.
Gail, you want to jump in with your question on privacy?
Okay, Gail.
Gail,
Wald.
Yeah.
Oh, can kind of hear you. No.
Uh-oh, we lost.
Yeah, you're there. You're there. No?
I can't hear you though.
Oh no, sorry. That was somebody else. Do you want us to read it?
Oh yeah, we can read it. Want us to go back to you in a minute? Okay.
Back? Okay.
Okay. Philana Payton, what's your question?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been amazing. I am so excited for your book, Danyel, incredibly excited. Daphne, you know how much I love and appreciate your work. So thank you so much for holding this conversation. I'm in the process of working on my first book on Black women in stardom. And I go from I mostly work with Hollywood, but of course, the overlap between the music industry and Hollywood is absolutely interrelated. So I'm constantly thinking about music scholarship. But I also am working a lot on Whitney. And so I'm so excited for everything that you have to say about her. And I think my main question, I think about a lot, and I have talked to other hip hop scholars about this, but how did your interviews with her and the time that you were talking to her, inform how you think about her relation to Black popular culture, specifically in the 90s, and the shifts between her iconography in the 80s, and then what started to happen in the 90s as far as her proximity to Blackness changing, her relationship, Waiting to Exhale happening, her marrying Bobby. How did your experiences interviewing her, how do you place Whitney within the conversations around Black popular culture and the shifts that happened between the 80s and the 90s? I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, it's a fine question, girl. I appreciate you asking. She said I only interviewed her for a sit-down formal interview one time. Mm-hmm. But it was long. It was 3 or 4 hours. So I do feel good about that. I'm trying to figure out what happened, if anything happened in our conversation that helped me place her. I don't even know if this is going to be a really good answer to the question, but I think what it did for me is to realize that you mentioned the words iconography and stardom and things like that. And she was all of those things. She has her place in all of those spaces. But I really do think that the conversation that I had with her that night, and also just interacting with her socially at music industry events, is that she was an actual person. That was the thing that I take away from it, is that she was an actual human being with a home and a baby daughter and a kind of a wayward husband and a trophy case that she kept in, downstairs away from people seeing it. And just, I don't know, it was just, I feel like I'm seeing somebody walking through oh, there we go. I'm sorry. But yeah, I think it just contributed to her being quite human. I feel like you're taking on stardom, so I don't know if that is really helpful, but to me, I think I do try to see that that there is a human in every one of these women, even as famous as they are, even though they're the icons that they are.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us as well.
That was such a cool question. Gail, are you back with us? Do you want to try again?
Yeah, I'm so sorry for messing things up. I was actually I just have to say, well, thank you so much. This is such an amazing conversation. I've been walking and listening, and it was weird. There was this weird synergy that every time you would say something, Danielle, I would see a t-shirt that said it. You're talking about Black girlhood. I see a t-shirt, Black Girl Magic. You say I'm literally the t-shirt's walking in front of me.
Oh,
so I was having like it was a weird walk. This happened 3 times, so I'm not sure what it means. Anyway, I so appreciate this. So my question is about, ever since, thinking, it bounces off of Daphne's work a little bit, particularly her work on Geechee and Elvie, which has I've been sitting with, and it has to do with kind of questions. I put it in the chat as like privacy, but it's not quite privacy because that's like a corporate word. It has to do with discretion. I'm wondering kind of, because Daphne has written beautifully about kind of, and again, this is like too neoliberal a phrase, but like the right of Black women to a certain privacy, the privilege not to be known or seen all the time. And this kind of makes me wonder how, I think the best word I can think of is discretion. You've seen a lot of things, but you're also writing about yourself. So how, as a writer, you're thinking opacity, Daphne just chatted. How, as a writer, you think about kind of protecting people or trying to be discreet, and how you kind of dealt with that with your own, stuff? Because I think probably if you're doing that kind of writing, you're always balancing between like kind of sharing and oversharing and knowing when to hold back and when not to. So I'm just really curious how you dealt with that.
Oh, it's the worst and the hardest part is the first thing. I mean, Joan Didion is saying it better than any of us, right? That when you're a writer, you're always selling somebody out. So there's these kind of things that you deal with, that I deal with all the time. I've been dealing with my whole career, the fact that a lot of times when I write about Black people and Black women, is that people aren't necessarily, they have in mind a profile of themselves. They have in mind a self of who they are. Not everybody is ready for or wants to have their story told through the lens of somebody else. And it's a very difficult thing to say, but I will say it. I think it helps the world when people tell stories about each other, as long as they are coming from an empathetic space and a place of, paying attention to truth and facts as best you can. And also, like I've been saying on this call, but also having some passion and some of, bringing some of your own self to the story. I think all of that is important. It doesn't make it all easy. I mean, there's a not famous maybe, but notorious talk that I gave for The Moth about almost getting to physical altercation with a particular rapper who did not like the story that I told about her. And what that taught me and how it changed me. It's a very fine line to walk. I just choose to walk it. I feel like I hesitate to use the word always because it's just such a big word, like never, but I feel like I'm pretty much always empathetic. As we were just talking to the previous questioner, I believe in people as human beings. I do not believe in athletes or stars as like emblems or avatars. I believe in them as actual people with blood running through their veins and histories and places and people and things that mean things to them. And this is what I'm trying to capture. Even with all that quote unquote goodness at heart, though, that still doesn't mean that the person is ready. I try to read all different types of biography. And autobiography and memoir and diaries and all these kind of things to keep me on the straight and narrow, to set me straight and all these kind of things, but I'm still going to do, what I'm going to do. And I believe I'm doing good work. I think I'm not trying to pull a curtain back on a person when they're like in their slip or in their panties and bra or whatever. But I do feel like I do want somebody to raise their sunglasses, you know. I want somebody to walk barefoot. I want other people to see them a little bit for how they are, but that doesn't mean that they're ready for that. And it's been a constant in my career negotiating that. I have no easy answer. I can only imagine that it will continue if I'm lucky.
Wow. Dode, do you want to ask your question?
Who's that?
Daoud Tyler Amin? Oh, okay, sure. I will read. Daoud wants his question read. I will read it for sure. Just type away.
Is this Daoud from where does this person work?
From NPR.
Yes. Oh my God, you're my editor. Speak it out. Speak it out. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Okay.
I like to see my team here.
Right. Oh my God. Let's go. Such a great editor. Called me to write Sade. Am I losing my memory?
No, that's right. Sorry, I was gonna stay out of the audio visual part of this entirely because spring hit me like a ton of bricks today. But no, I'll read what I wrote in the chat. I wrote, Danyel, one magic trick of your writing is that the parts about identity and socioeconomics, yours and the artist's, never feel remotely forced or grafted on. That's something I see developing writers struggle with a little, knowing that they want to address the world around the music, but not knowing how or why to connect it to the work. So those parts don't flow as naturally as when they're talking about music for its own sake. Any advice you'd give for letting those moments arise organically?
First of all, I don't understand why I can't see you because I've never seen you in real life, but I'm just being bitter and stingy. And the other thing is, why are you not introducing yourself as a person who really edited like one of the best pieces that I've written in like the last 2 years? You called me when I was on vacation to write that Sade piece. The only reason I was able to write that Sade piece for NPR is because I wrote Shine Bright and finally had enough confidence to write about myself. And then what happens, the way the world works, is that now everybody thinks that I always knew how to do it. But it's just not true. And you helped me and you walked me through that. That piece went through more revisions than I even want to admit. And you got me there. So I appreciate you talking about all what magic is happening in my writing. And I'm not saying that there isn't some, but you're a fantastic, like really a genius of an editor, and you are appreciated. I thank you for joining the call. Now, whatever that question was about socioeconomics and getting it in the piece, listen, when I'm editing, I try to tell people, like we were talking about earlier, just ground it. Like, I don't know, like we all say the internet is bad, and it is, it's awful, right? But is it? Because just look stuff up. Look up, go to the almanac on the day the artist was born. Was it sunny? Like go to, is the name of their street, like, did they grow up on Bethune Avenue? Was it named after Mary McCloy Bethune? What was going on there? How can we tie that? Go to the newspapers.com, find the hometown newspaper on the day that person turned 18. See what kind of world they were living in when they were coming into their creativity. Like, I don't think there's this thing we have to say, even though sometimes it helps, like even in Shine Bright, talking about what Brooklyn was like when Stephanie Mills was growing up. And it's like, Brooklyn was like the biggest Black space in the United States after the South Side of Chicago. I think that's important to know. And I said it just like that, but there's also other ways to say that. To talk about the rioting that was going on in Harlem at the same time and was kind of leaking into Brooklyn. And like, what was that like for a little girl that was 11 or 12 years old? And her parents that were trying to make a life for their kids. So I just feel like you have to follow your nose, you have to follow your creativity, and you have to use search like with super like attention to detail. Like just to be like, going back to Marilyn McCoo, I remember when I got on the phone with her, she says, if you ask me anything that you should already know, I'm not going to enjoy this phone call, which I'm fine to take from her. But it's like, because she's right. I was talking to somebody earlier today, I said, ask the person their middle name. Why were they named that? There's always a story to a middle name. It's very rare that there's not a story to a middle name or a confirmation name if you're Catholic. So just ask, like, I mean, I could say that there's magic in that, but really I think that's where the work, the magic must be the work then, because to me, that's what it is. I like to have too much and peel back. We did that with Sade. I had too much and we peeled back. And, you know, I wanted to know, like, what did her mother do for a living? For Sade to make a song called When Am I Going to Make a Living? Her mother was a home care nurse. You know what that work is. I mean, most of us know what that work is. It's wonderful if you love it. It's backbreaking though. It's backbreaking. Helping sometimes strangers with their most intimate situations. And this is who raised Sade. That has to contribute to her making a song and having the kind of ambition that she has. So I just feel like, be nosy, but go beyond like, this person was born in this year and this person was president at that time. There's way more. Take it to the person's hometown, the hospital where they were born, who was a newscaster at that time. Just like get it in. It really, maybe this sounds nerdy, but really that's the funnest part for me. I hope that answers your question. And also we should really catch up. Hello.
You're saying it like it's no big thing, but this is gigantic advice. I mean, I think the place where a lot of people get stuck is that they know there's this handful of things that they're supposed to address, and they kind of throw them in like vocabulary words.
What are the
what I
handful
think
of things?
Well, it's I mean, it's a thing I see in pitches every day where it's like there's a paragraph that just sort of lists like identity signifiers. It's just, you know, like sort of long unbroken sentences of like, you know, just you know, whether it's race or it's gender, it's sexuality or whatever, but it never really like loops back around to the work. And what I think I hear you saying is that if you dig into details, specifically like the context of like time and place, and you go 2 or 3 layers deeper than you initially think to, then all that identity stuff is going to jump out.
It will. And I should be honest and say, I also taught a class at the New School called Creating a Sense of Place and History in Your Fiction and Nonfiction Writing. So it's something that I do actually take very seriously. And I don't mean it to be like it's not a big deal. I think I just don't want to make it seem hard for people. I don't want to make it seem like it's so difficult for you to do it, because allow yourself to get caught up in even the lyrics of a song, man, and just start looking for where they came from or what those references are. And then go further. If they mention, like Sade mentions Victoria Lake, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that was until we worked on our piece. So, you know, but you look these things, I don't even know if we used it, but I know now what it is. So, you know what I mean? And I could use it or not. And also just knowing these things. And I think this is the main part for me, just doing that research and knowing these things, you are more confident in getting from word 1 to word 2,500. You feel learned on your topic and you feel like I have a right to write about Sade's life because now I just know so much about it. And so that's when, to me, my fingers start doing whatever that old saying used to be. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Thanks, Danielle. That's what's up.
This felt like a seminar itself, this amazing conversation between Danielle and Daphne, and thank you both so much. I wish I could print out this chat and I'm going to, and like put it on my wall. And I think it's time for us to wrap up today, right? So thanks to everybody for showing up, being here. This was amazing.
Congratulations, Danielle.
You guys are seriously the best.